Morning guys, Eric in the alley again. Today, I was going to just show you a video of a couple melted cats, but there's two things on your scan tool. They're actually under global, so you don't even need factory software to find these. But the main thing we're going to be looking at are two things. Every time I come across a car that I'm suspecting a breathing problem, these are two things I look at on the scan tool, and it's, under mode 6. Mode 6, it's always going to be a good asset. I use it a lot of times looking for a random misfire. If I feel something in the steering wheel or, just a little bump, it's easy to go under mode 6. Look at your misfire counters. A lot of times you're going to see 0, but whenever it was misfiring, did the computer pick it up at all? Even if it wasn't enough to set the misfire light, you're going to see a misfire. Well, you're going to see that the computer saw something there. You're not going to see it under the misfire counter. Right above it, there's something called exponentially weighted moving average, EWMA for short. Now, you're going to see that on any scan tool. It's not under the factory. It's under mode 6 under global. You could see your misfires. But now, if you see a number under that EWMA, you know the computer was looking there. It picked up something under that circuit last time. And the EWMA, it's an average of where it was looking last and where the fault detection is looking right now. So even if there is no fault now, if your misfire counter is 0 and you see a number under the EWMA, that means the computer was looking there. It's great for all different kinds of misfires. It's going to come in handy whenever you don't feel a misfire all the time. But whenever you take a look at this, it's just a snapshot. It doesn't update in live time. So you have to back out of mode 6 again and then re-enter it. If you felt a misfire and you want to see if it picked it up, it only picks up a snapshot. You're looking at it. Any misfires that happen after that, you're not going to see it update in real time. But what's great about it is even if that misfire is 0, you're going to see where it was looking. I mean, if it was looking there, there's a reason. And when a misfire due to anything, there's quite a bit of tolerance on the amount of misfires it can pick up before it sets the light. So we're not using the light to help us find this. We're just using where that computer was looking, how happy it was with what it saw, the higher the number's going to be. It's just much easier for a computer. So we'll just say our number was 50, where it was. Instead of having to go from 0 to 50, it'll remember 50 from last time. So that way, if the value is 55, it only goes up 5, from 50 to 5. That's where it's giving you where it looked last and where it's looking now. If the standard way of going from before this, it would have been from 0 to 50 and then from 0 to 55. So you see that's 105 units the computer would have had to measure as opposed to just 5. So that's how it works. And I mean, it could work great for you finding the misfires. The other one's calculated load. That's always a great one for if you're suspecting either a breathing problem on the intake or the exhaust. Now, the number one thing with calculated load and why it's so good to look at, as soon as you pull the car in, whenever you're looking at the calculated load, if it's idling and the calculated load is high, then that means either if you have a MAF sensor, it's good. Yeah, I'd check that. I'd clean it, check it, make sure it's working good, make sure it's reporting right. But if it's low in your garage bay and you take it for a ride, it's what calculated load does, and I'm going to explain a little bit more later, but what calculated load does is it's giving you the potential of the engine's power at wide open throttle. So if it's getting a very high number, if it's saying it's like I'd say over 30s where you really got to start be looking at 20s, even a little bit high for a low mileage engine. These higher mileage engines, 20s are, normal. But if you're looking at 30 or over just sitting there, then it's, you want to look at the intake problem, plugged air filter, something like that, misreport MAF sensor. But when you take it for a ride and you hold it to wide open throttle, in this case, this Jeep only went up to 70%. So it's only using 70% of its potential at wide open throttle, even though I was only at I was already at wide open throttle. It should have been in the 90s, you know, high 90s if the engine's breathing right in and out. But I'll tell you the secret on this one that made me look towards the catalytic converter. Normally, if you have misfires occurring across the board, like all cylinders on both banks, you know, it's either going to be fuel. That's always the first place to start. Exhaust is second. But my fuel gauge, this doesn't have a Schrader valve. I'm going to be making one for my fuel pressure gauge to go in. I don't have one for 5/16, so I make it out of the nylon tubing, and then I just use a quick disconnect fittings, and then you could attach either your pressure transducer or your fuel pressure gauge. But I didn't have that for this one. Now, a good way to do that, to check that too, is watch your O2 sensors when you take it on the test drive. Whenever you floor it, they should go full rich. But while I was testing the O2 sensors, there's a great trick I seen on South Main Auto, Eric O, to make sure we're getting the low of the O2 sensors. You pump the brake pedal. The power booster is going to use all the vacuum available, and your O2 sensor is going to go straight lean. So what happened whenever I was pumping the brake pedal, I did it twice. The second time, I got a code of PO 430 for the catalytic converter efficiency on bank 2. So that was a great, you know, right in the engine bay, it gave me, or right in the garage bay, it gave me direction to go after, take that O2 sensor out and have a look at that catalytic converter, because I'm just checking the O2s, but, you know, triggered the code. And the story with the car is I put axle bearings in it. They took it to get it inspected. In Pennsylvania, you could have one monitor not run for a 2011. Some of the older ones, you could have two monitors not run and still get an inspection sticker, but you can't get an emission sticker with any of the, you know, tests not run, the self-diagnostic tests. Now, when they took it, they've been driving it for quite a while. I had it in here, I put axle bearings in it, and when they took it, the catalyst monitor wasn't ready to run. So they've been driving this car for a couple months and it never ran the catalyst monitor. I followed the criteria. It was driving over 25 miles an hour for a certain amount of miles, shutting or letting it idle for a couple minutes, and then starting off again and driving over 25 miles an hour. I did that twice, what I thought would have ran it, and it still didn't run. So that definitely gave me direction to go after the cat and not the fuel. But if I didn't have any hints like that, if it didn't trigger the code, fuel pressure would have been my, you know, your first go-to if you have random misfires going across the board. But this computer is taking away fuel. It's running too rich. Now, plugged exhaust is going to get you that. I mean, it's going to make your O2 sensors pick up, because it's just not pushing all the fumes out. They're staying, you know, locked somewhere in the pipe. And every time the exhaust valve opens, there's already exhaust in it. So that's what a plug cat's going to do. Now, this is one cat. It doesn't have a downstream in the middle. So what I'm suspecting is the broken off pieces are in the Y pipe, because it's affecting both banks. All right, guys, I'll get to the scan data where I started recording, and then I'll give you a better explanation. I'll put it at the end if you want to look in more technical what the calculated load does and what the EWMA does. Good things to check, guys. All right, it's going to help you fix cars. I guarantee it.
Cylinder 5, everybody's jumping in. All right, the resistance on the EGR valve. I never trust these on Dodges. A lot of time on anything really. A lot of time they stick open. I'm just trying to figure out why this is taking away so much fuel with idle. We're trying to anyway. We're above 10%, so that's when you really start looking for a problem. I made these leads a while ago. It's good to keep them in your toolbox. You use them again. I know several different sizes, but the spec should be in between 9.5 and 10.5 ohms. 9.6, we're right in there. We're right on the low end of resistance, so that's good. Good low-tech test. Just put your mind at ease, because whenever the valve sticks open, it usually causes a higher resistance. So I just always double-check them things.
All right, guys, in the first part, I just pulled the spark plugs. If I see a random misfire, any kind of misfire, I always pull one plug. Yeah, in this case, I pulled all 6 because they were supposed to be new along with the wires. I'm going to just show you how to ohm out the wires real quick, look for trouble. In this case, these plugs were new, so I regapped them, which you're not supposed to do. They're supposed to come pre-gapped. You shouldn't have to touch them. These all seemed like they were going for 35 thousandths, even though that wasn't our spec. They were all pre-gapped for 35 thousandths. Whoever installed them just put them in the way they came. You're always supposed to check. That gap could be off, and I'll show you a way real quick. If your gap is off, this is how I set them without damaging them. But if I get an engine I have no history with, I didn't put the plugs in it, I don't know the condition. How many times have we pulled plugs on an engine and found a couple that were a different brand? I mean, it happens. You don't want to get beat on a spark plug. That's where the fire's coming from. That's where it starts. That's where you want to start too. Make sure, you know, the plugs are gapped right. Make sure they're new. Make sure they're in good working condition before you even move on. So this is just a simple way to gap them with a filler gauge. I use a spark plug gapping tool. You know, it's pretty self-explanatory, but this is just how you do it. And then you move on from there. Even though I had, you know, an inclination that this wasn't the problem from seeing the O2 sensor code or the catalyst efficiency code, you always start with the spark plug on a misfire. You don't want to go anywhere else.
All right, the first thing is I set the gap with filler gauges, but to quickly check what they're at, you're not going to sit there and play with gauges to see what an old plug is. These come in handy for that. But I set it where it's supposed to be. It's 43 thousandths. So whatever you got to come up with, I have a 35 and an 8. But this would be the one that was firing. I'm keeping track of which end would have been on the exhaust or on the companion cylinder, which end's right underneath the plug. Then I'm going to record everything. Like you could see the gap on this one. I can't even fit the gauges in. The gap on this one has room for plenty more. So that's when I just use the little gauge, the little disc. Now I don't like these for setting, but you could tell we're about 53 thousandths. So that one's over. This one is about 38. This one's under. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep making a note, keeping in order which ones. I'm going to just simply plug this back in when I'm done, or just put one back in the coil. And I'm writing down in a notepad the gaps, and then I'm going to measure each wire for resistance. I mean, it's pretty easy, pretty straightforward. And if you Google it, you're going to get a spec. It's like from 1K to 12K. So you're definitely going to want to look up your spec. This one is actually 10K. So we're looking for 10,000. Whatever scale you got, just make sure you're on resistance, and no special back probes, just the leads that come with your meter. Make sure you're touching the metal though. And just stick one in each end. You kind of got to hold two with one hand, but 11.7. And then you move the wire around. I just bend it, try to hit it off something. It's hard while you're holding it, but just try to hit it off the table, like bounce it a little bit. So we're going to just say it went up to 11.75 first. Now I'm going to just write that down. Wire. Then move on to the next one. Then we're going to compare them all, but the plugs, that's what the shame is. They told her they put new plugs and wires on it whenever they bought it. These wires, sometimes you see the ones with the companion cylinder marked on them like this, but usually the aftermarket wires don't have that, but they do look kind of new. So that's why I'm thinking maybe Amazon, but that's a shame. These are, you know, they're past the spec. The plugs are definitely newer. They're not original. They're the right type. I mean, they don't look, I don't see anything off on them. I'm no expert at identifying like a lot of the counterfeit spark plugs, but they're the right type. So we're going to just, if they're all in this shape, I'm going to reset the gap. One enhance. I was probably trying to focus on the meter. But the tips aren't bad. You could still see the groove in the electrode. But you could tell they're newer. The chrome's still very shiny. There's no buildup around here, no carbon tracks. There you go, there's a little bit better. Look at the tips in the electrodes. I could tell what my eyes one was different as soon as I took them out. So either somebody dropped one of these or, you know, they weren't pre-gap and they assumed they were. But I'm going to pull them all out, measure them like that, and maybe take a look inside the engine with a camera for, you know, just because the plugs are out, basically. Okay, guys, same thing. This is the second coil. This will be for cylinders 2 and 6. All right, guys, this is the second coil. This would actually be for, it sits on top of cylinder 3, and the wasted spark goes to, or the reverse polarity spark goes to cylinder 6. Here's the plug. And we're looking about 36 thousandths. So that one's short. $36 and $35. All right, I'm going to write that down. Now with the multimeter, put on resistance. Always just check your reads. All right, just go on. Let's put it in there. You could get it behind the rubber and touch the metal so it stays in there a little bit. .84 and up to 10 is fine, so that wire's good. Okay, guys, this is the last cylinder, number 5 and number 2. And we'll call that in about 37. And this one would be on the wire. Call that in about 36. So it looks like maybe 35 thousandths was what they were going for on the pre-gap. Do the same thing. And just put one in between the rubber and the metal. 7,540. All right, guys, the first contender, we have coil number 1 and cylinder number 4. That's what it controls. It's a waste spark system, so it's just basically getting back home. This plug gap was at 58 thousandths. This plug gap was at 38 thousandths. 43 is what we're after. The plug wire was at 11,750 ohm. The spec is 10,000 or below is bad, or as good, above is bad. So this wire is technically on the bad side. Not enough to cause the computer to take 10% of the fuel away, but, you know, it's slightly out of spec. This is coil number 2. I'm calling it coil number 2 just for identification, but it controls cylinder number 3, cylinder number 6. This was 36 thousandths. This is 35 thousandths. Again, 43 thousandths is the spec. The wire was 6,840, so that wire's in spec. Both the plugs are under gapped. This is the last coil. This controls cylinder 5 and cylinder 2. This gap was 37 thousandths. This gap was 36 thousandths. The wire was 7,540 ohm. So, you know, the wire's in spec. Both the plugs are under gapped again. The way it's looking, as new as these plugs are, you're not supposed to gap old plugs or re-gap iridiums or anything new. But you want to make sure if you do, I'll show you how with a little pair of pliers. These are so new that, you know, I'll take a chance re-gapping them because it's that close. We'll just set it right. We'll see if that fuel trim changes. All right, just looking at the differences in spark plug gaps, but the main thing is I could tell these were replaced. So somebody wasn't BSing her. The one wire being a little bit out of spec, that's not going to affect much. Now, they were either pre-gapped for somewhere around 35 thousandths or somebody dropped them, whatever the case may be, but they're not that old. I don't generally like re-gapping spark plugs, but you know, just to get this a baseline, you can even see the crush washer's still, you know, intact. These are real tiny crescent pliers. They're like for very fine electronics. You could bend it. It goes down to a point, but they're a little bit thick, so you got a little bit of bending power. You never want to put anything in between there other than the filler gauge. And you want to grab these at a point. You don't want to grab them here. I don't know if you could see that. And bend outward because you're going to move the tip of the ground strap this way. You want to get right here on this bend. Make sure you don't touch the ceramic. See how it's right on that bend without touching anything. And then you just want to give it just the slightest of nudge. Make sure your spec fits. That's a pretty tight fit right there, just opening it up. But I never like ending on like increasing the gap. I always like to push back down on that ground strap just as a final adjustment. And these tools are really cheap. This was an Amazon one. And you put the filler gauge in, and I put it long ways so it goes with the ground strap. When you're tightening it down, you don't want to tighten too hard, but you don't want to be able to drag it. Because when you loosen it, the resistance in the metal, it's going to spring back some. And now you got a nice perfect gap. Just a tiny, just enough to drag it. You can't rock it back and forth much. I usually use the tip after that because it'll go further back into the plug. There's nice, doesn't lose contact. That way we know every single plug's at the same gap. Give us a good baseline. Anything that you don't know anything about, you got to start somewhere. It's trying to take fuel away. You know, it is big spark plug gaps going to cause that? I don't know. Two of the plugs were, you know, almost hand tight. Will that cause that? I don't know, but at least we're going to get it back to baseline. And I couldn't find a vacuum leak without smoke. There's a few things that it doesn't have a mass airflow sensor. There's a few things like the fuel pressure regulator. Unfortunately, it's part of the fuel pump in the tank. Could be giving it more fuel, could have an injector stuck open or staying open too long. Anything like that, but you know, we need some kind of baseline. And I don't trust just taking them out of the box and putting them in, trusting that they're pre-gapped, especially if you order them. I noticed like O'Reilly's, they're pretty good. If you get plugs, they're usually gapped for your vehicle. Sometimes like Rock Auto or even Napa, you'll get something like that, 35 thousandths, no matter what the spec for the car is. So you want to double check every time. All right, guys, first I'm going to use this to go into the bolt where the O2 sensor goes so we can take a look at the catalyst. It has a short cable. This is a depth tech. This one's a rail cam. I like that one. This one has longer 25-foot cable, so I'm going to see if I could get that up the exhaust pipe till we can run into the obstruction. But I'm going to get under there with this right now, and I got the little tripod out. We're going to take that under there, give you guys a view of what I'm doing. Okay, guys. This is the driver's side. I took the O2 sensors out. I just took a 7/8 wrench. Same thing, a good Airco tip. Hit these hard and fast, cold. No lubricant, just one good sharp twist whenever they're cold, when the pipe hasn't been run recently, and they both came right out. This one's on an angle. I'll show you when we get to the other one, and it still came right out. Now I'm going to put the camera right through this hole. Oddly enough, they call that a bunk hole. And oddly enough, this is the same thing that the doctor uses on it, endoscope. We turn it on. This is the depth tech. This one will move a little bit with the wheel. You could turn it side to side. This is what I look at the exhaust valves with, or the intake valve. Inside the cylinder, anything. Okay, let me fire this up. This is just the rail cam. I'll download off of here what we see, but this one's kind of normal. There's a space in between. You see the honeycomb? I'm going to try to turn the wheel a little bit. You see how the honeycomb's still intact? That's your catalyst. A lot of times it'll still be intact, but you won't be able to see. There'll be oil fouling out the honeycomb. If you needed to test it, you could put something right in here, or you could just run it without these in it, or the upstream one if you really want to make sure there's no restriction in here. If it runs better without the upstream in, then you really got to suspect these. Now that's what a diesel one looks like. I know it's not the greatest image, but hopefully it shows up a little bit better on when I upload it to the screen.
Guys, here I come. If you hear me scream, that's my hair in the creeper.
It's not a very fun situation to be in. Hey guys, Dodge in their infinite wisdom decided to put the O2 sensor hole on top of this cat. But it's the same thing. This is where that articulating head does help. Boy, we don't even have to be inside it to see that. Wow. Yeah, we're missing a chunk there. This would be looking, I want to make sure we're looking, whenever I pull my thumb down, we're looking downstream towards the tailpipe. So this way's towards the tailpipe where all this is. I don't know if you can see that, but like I said, I'm going to put it on screen, download it from the rail cam. Looks like the back of the cat right there. I'm going to just switch it on to movie. Oh. So there's still another catalyst behind that one. This would be looking forward. This would be looking towards the tailpipe. That's coming down. That's apparently all the other catalysts laying on top of that one. See, it's still no fault codes. I'm going to move on. Live data. You can feel a little bump in it for sure. I believe towards the end they put their fuel trim. You see the long terms -11 and -12 for bank 1, so it's affecting both banks. It's the plug cap, and we've seen the pieces missing. I'm guessing they're further down the Y pipe. That's my only explanation why it would be pulling fuel from, you know, 2 cylinders, but mainly in the long term, just not breathing good. Now, I'm not sure if they have the calculated load on here. On my other scanner, it has the, under just the basic OBD, it has the calculated load, and it was around 22-23%, which isn't bad. Like when you're looking for a breathing problem, if that's high, it's usually something with a MAF sensor, something it's not breathing in very good. That's where I look for that. Well, naturally we're in the intake and the exhaust, but I know it's under global, but I'm not sure if they give me the calculated load under. No. But anyways. Okay guys, this is under global, the live data. This is what I just wanted to show you, the calculated load value. It's 20 or low 20s. That's not very bad. That's how much of the engine's power it's using to idle based on the airflow, usually from like a MAF sensor. This engine does not have a MAF sensor. It runs off of the MAP sensor, and it calculates how much fuel based on how much vacuum the MAP sensor is seeing and the speed in which it's seeing it. So that's why they call them a speed density engine. Whenever we're looking at the calculated load, a lot of people, I've seen videos put it that way. I don't want to say a lot of people, but the calculated load, they're looking for it to be very high if you have a plug cat. I usually find that's on the air intake, because we could see this, the cat's, you know, broken apart in there. We've seen it with our own eyes. It's taking away fuel because it can't breathe coming out the exhaust. But the calculated load isn't too. As the cooling fan comes on, goes up a little bit, down a little bit. Sometimes you see things in the 30s or 40s. I mean, you know it's not breathing right somewhere. But I find the calculated load, don't let it fool you. Don't use that for an exhaust breathing test. That's more of an intake breathing test. Is it getting its air right? And you know, around 20 for a car with 130,000 on the clock. Where is the clock? 129,000, so that's not too bad. It's breathing pretty good in, it's just not getting rid of it. Now under global, there's no fault codes. Just want to double check it, but mode 6, that's always your friend. Sometimes it's your only friend, but it's going to tell you more where it was looking for misfires, where it was looking the hardest. See, everything's passing. Even the fuel trim is passing. You misfire. For cylinder 2, 2 counts. Or for cylinder 1. For lasting current driving cycles, 2. Misfire counts for cylinder number 2, 1. And this is something that I'll explain a little bit later in a different video. But this exponential weighted moving average, the EWMA, this is where the computer is looking the hardest. The higher the number value, the harder it's looking. Whenever it sees things getting corrected, this number will get lower and lower until it's 0. We could see cylinder 2, it's looking harder. Cylinder 3 has no misfires, and it's not looking at cylinder 3. No misfires for cylinder 4, but apparently there was. Now mode 6 is not live. This isn't current. It's not picking up anything right now. You have to go out and come back in, and then it'll update. But look at this, 11. The exponential weighted moving average for cylinder 5, we're at 11. So it's looking here pretty hard, but look, it's seen 66 misfires. Cylinder 6, it's not looking quite as hard. I'd only seen 5 misfires. But whatever cylinder, even if you're seeing 0 misfires, you could see 0 misfires like this, but it's still looking. It saw one here before. If you shut the car off and turned it back on, there could be a misfire there. If you took it for a ride, this could have turned to 0. But the higher the number, the more priority the computer is giving that cylinder. It's running its diagnostics aimed at that cylinder. The higher the number, the harder it looks.
Okay guys, on calculated load, the only things worth mentioning are that this is an average that your computer is going to take of what your engine could produce. How much power it could produce based on the airflow at wide open throttle, and also based on the temperature. So if it's way off, you could also look towards the coolant temperature sensor, because that's going to affect the temperature that it's running at. It takes into account for all the environmental, your altitude. It takes into account for the temperature of the coolant, temperature of the incoming air. Everything it has access to is going to add to this calculated load. It even takes into account engine wear. So it's going to know that at 100% breathing, no matter what shape your engine is in, mechanically, it should reach 100. Now, this is also a good sign. If something doesn't sound right, you hear some grinding sounds coming from a crankcase. Even at idle, an engine that's about to seize, it's going to have a very high calculated load because it's based on wide open throttle. It knows this engine isn't going to move. So it's going to, it's going to greatly affect it, especially at idle there. The lower the RPM, the more a seizing engine is going to have, a drag on the power it's producing. So that's another good way to use it. But basically, if it's high in the garage bay, you're going to look towards breathing. If it's high, whenever you're taking it for a test drive, try this. It's always a good way to check the cats, make sure the exhaust's breathing before you even pull it back in, and start diagnosing something that might lead back to that. Now this car, it could be something else. It very well could be something else causing it to add so much fuel. But the first place you got to start is what the computer's picking up. The computer's picking up the misfires only under mode 6. There's nothing on the no code for misfires. That's just something that we're observing following the code. The code is for the passenger side cat, and we see that's blown to pieces. So you go after the code first, and then you check again, because it's hard to diagnose a car that's not breathing right. At idle, why it's taking away that much fuel, it could be the fuel pressure regulator. It happens to be in the fuel tank. So you want to get as much information as you can out of the test drive, And then using these two things, the EWMA and the calculated load, give it a shot. Like, I mean, we all go rate the fuel trims, we all go rate the O2s, we check the temperature, we check the barometric pressure, make sure that all jives. You know, put a little bit more emphasis on these two. I mean, I've grown, you know, trust these and go to these regularly, especially to find direction just on the test drive, to know where I'm going to start as soon as I get back in the garage. So, all right, guys, that's about it. I'm going to show you, I did get the fuel pressure tees to make the fuel pressure gauge to check these, the 5/16. I'll show you that real quick in a little project I'm working on. And if you're interested in it, follow along. It's going to be pretty cool. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Adios.
All right, guys, my Amazon order came in. First, let me show you these. These are the fuel pressure tees. And what I'm going to use is a Dorman kit. It happens to be under the bag to make the nylon fuel lines. That's what I'm going to make and put a Schrader valve on the end of it so we could get fuel pressure readings just right in line. You could make these without the tee, but you're only deadheading the pump. You're not technically deadheading it because the regulator's in the tank, but what you're doing is only getting the fuel pressure at idle. That's what you're going to get. It's whenever you increase an RPM, you're not going to be able to test for conditions, just if it's getting pressure, which in a pinch could be helpful. But everything else I got that I'm working on, I'm building 2 pulse sensors that are twins. They're going to be the exact same. And what I did, now these are piezo sensors. They're very cheap. You get like, I think there was 20 in here for under 10 bucks. There's still a whole nother layer of them. So what I'm doing is I have one in here. They fit in there pretty good. This is the large sensor. I'm going to put the wiring through the back, and then the front I'm putting on the outside. I'm putting one and then one on the inside of the lid. So this will be focused directly onto the sensor. So see what kind of results we get. The reason I want 2 is for any car with a dual exhaust, or for a Harley Davidson or any, V-twin motorcycle, you could put one in each pipe and get both of your exhaust pulses. Or you could put one in the intake and you could put one in the exhaust, or, whatever you wanted to do. Now what I was going to do is use these and just use alligator clamps for the wiring, but then I figured I needed some BNC anyway, so I ordered some connectors. I had these ones. These ones are for RG58. These ones are for RG316. And this is some highly flexible Mucarife. I'm not even sure I'm saying that's right, but this is very flexible, and it has extra shielding on it. It's a pretty good RG316 for the signals we need. We don't need any more than, at the most, I'm going to have 15 feet if I ever use this that far, but I'm probably only going to use it for a 3-foot breakout. And then I could just put in another 3 meter. They come in the actual oscilloscope leads. I could plug that into it, and I should have enough room, more than enough room, to get to the back of a car to have a pulse sensor in it while my oscilloscope's at the front of it. So it's just a little cool project I'm working on building. Always got something going in the pile. Always have one project going, order things slowly, and that's the way it comes in. Now the RG316, they do use the smaller fitting. I thought I was going to be able to use these, but it's the other way around. I'm going to just put these on here. And for the RG58, that is pretty good cable for that, but I'm really trying out this RG316. And I also got a new set of crimpers we're going to be testing that. They come with 5 jaws, all coax. There's so many different types of coax. And for like 30 bucks, you get a crimper that you could change jaws. I have plenty of crimpers that changeable jaws, but the one I have for coax, it's RG58, just all in one jaw. So you get you don't know what the future is going to hold, especially if we're going to be building a lot of projects. You're going to want to have the flexibility to use any kind of coax, because I like it a lot better than the banana jacks and going straight into the scope with no adapter. That's the way to roll. All right, guys. Thanks a lot again for watching. As always, I appreciate it. Stay safe. Adios. Also, guys, in the box, we're going to be building, this is a pressure transducer out of a Honda. It's up to 500 PSI. We're going to be building a fuel pressure transducer with this because on the one I use for in-cylinder compression, I don't want to expose it to fuel all that much if I'm going to be using it for air. So this was a pretty good one. These are only 25 bucks, and this is a genuine Honda. I mean, the replacement was only $25 on eBay for a genuine Honda. So it's a pretty cheap way to get a transducer at a decent price. So, all right, guys, that's it. I promise.